Richard talked about being an entrepreneur, and obviously I am. I didn't know I was until I reflected on it and found out that I'd opened 30 different businesses. And when I got asked to write the vocational graduate certificate, I sort of sat down and said, hey, I've done a lot of this stuff. I got into education and learning, and I was blown away. I just thought, oh my God, what an industry, what an exciting time to be involved in this industry. It's, for me, it's one of the great growth industries in the 21st century. And I'll try to explain a little bit in that. But there's various things that I saw in this. First of all, that we were going into a digital information age, and I don't think we're fully aware of the transformation that's happening in our society. But Holden shut, Ford shut, Encyclopedia Britannica, 130 years of production now closed. The transformations that are happening in our society are all about the transformation of going from an industrial age to a digital age. And that transformation, in my mind, as an entrepreneur, remember I see probably a little bit down the track than the average person, I see the transformation being just as big as the one that happened between the agricultural age to the industrial age 270 years ago. So we're not ready for this because none of us have been through a change of this proportion. But believe me, it's happening. And it's happening in corporate, it's happening in every facet of our life. Some industries are already disrupted, others are waiting to be disrupted. And I see education and learning as one of those areas that's awaiting disruption. And I'm trying to be part of it to obviously make a positive contribution to it. The other thing, the half-life of skills. Our skills that we learned are getting, the usefulness of them is getting shorter and shorter. You know, before you could go and do a uni and that skills you learned in engineering would last you for the whole of your career. Now you're flat out finishing uni and having knowledge that's sufficient to when what you learned in first year is probably now out of date. Things are changing fast, and so we're getting this problem of half-life of the skills that we're learning, and we need to think about how we're going to deal with that. But there's new learning products, and while I talk about disruption and reform, there will always be a place for all of our current institutions, but there's new products, there's new learning products that are emerging, ones that couldn't get a voice before in the old system that we had, or the industrial age system we had. In the digital age, we now have a new form of learning. Same way that bloggers created news, and if I could just ask, how many of you bought a newspaper this morning on the way? You know, you bought a newspaper? Yeah? No. How many of you checked your feeds to see what was happening in the world on Twitter or online or something like that? Yeah. We still have news, we just have it in a different form now. And that's what I see with learning. We're still going to have learning, we're still going to have education, but it's going to come in a lot of different forms. And you guys, as learning development managers, you've got a place to play in this. You know, you could be thought leaders and front runners in this particular area. So I see it as highly contextualized, and I'll talk to you a little bit later about how contextualized it can become. It's bite-sized now. It's 3 minutes is about the learning module now, you know, visual, and it's about completing jigsaws. It's not necessarily about linear progression. It's not sitting down and going through a process. It's actually taking the bite size. I think I cover it a little bit later, but crowdsource, this is another characteristic of the digital age, is that we're crowdsourcing everything. In entrepreneurship, we're crowdsourcing funding. I don't know whether any of you have heard about this, but people put up ideas online and they raise sometimes up to millions of dollars from the crowd to fund their business because everyone believes in it, loves it. But crowdsourcing is becoming a big part, particularly of knowledge, particularly of learning, particularly of education. So instead of it just being the elite few, we're all participating in education. And my challenge to you today is to think about your whole organisation, the intellectual capital in your whole organisation, and say, how can we capture that? How can we capture that intellectual capital and use it? And it's about just in time. The online world, or the digital world, is bringing about the possibility of just in time learning. Most of us did just in case learning. Most of us went to universities and colleges and such, and we did this training just in case in the future we might have to use it. Well, that's not the learning in the digital age. The learning in the digital age is to pull out your iPhone or your pad, type into YouTube, how do I do something, watch a 3-minute video and get the learning that you need. This is the new learning that's taking place, and we need to be aware of that. Mobiles and tablets are now selling more globally than PCs. In 2015, We're almost at that tipping point now that more tablets and mobiles are being sold than PCs. So people are mobile. So learning has to be mobile. We've got to forget about this classroom-based necessarily just on its own. We've got to think beyond that and think about how can we deliver learning in the workplace through the mobile content, digital content. But this is what I particularly saw. You know, this just blew me away, is this thing here. The amount of untapped intellectual capital that resides in this room. You know, most of you, I guess, not a lot of you probably write extensively online, but I've now written about 500,000 words, probably more than that now. But because I've wanted to start downloading my knowledge base. And I do it through a site, mostly at the moment, called Quora, which is a Q&A site. And what happens with a lot of the articles I write, they get picked up by Forbes and Huffington Post and so forth. So I see that, and I see that it's untapped because we haven't figured out a way of capturing it. Well, I've spent the last couple of years trying to figure that out for myself, and that's what I'm here to share with you today. But also what I saw was the masses of people that are now connected on the internet. We're up to 2 billion people. So we've still got another 5 billion people to connect. And the way that things are going in terms of technology, a lot of satellites are being launched to reach the rest of the planet. A lot of internet access is being made available free by people like Facebook. So we are going to have an interconnected world pretty soon of these people, learner-hungry world. You know, we're engorged with education here. Most of us are sick and tired of it. Most of your employees and staff are sick and tired. They've done education since they were knee-high to a grasshopper. But there's a whole world out there that know nothing. There's a whole world out there that need to even just learn the basics. And when I saw this vast untapped resource, and then I saw this learner-hungry world that were just crying out for information, I spoke to Phil, my brother, about it, because he comes from an education admin background, whereas I come from an entrepreneurial one. And we sat down and we said, we need to create an organisation that can create this bridge. And I know I'm not selling today. Please don't think that I'm selling anything. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm usually sell mode, but today I'm not in sell mode. I'm in information mode. But we created this organisation because we wanted to mobilise this intellectual capital, this vast untapped resource. We wanted to mobilise it. We wanted to create a bridge between our members and vocational trainers who are looking for people to engage with in terms of content, and then to bridge between them and the digital masses that are out there, the learner-hungry world. So we've been working on ways in which we can capture and publish intellectual capital through learning resources. We're currently, Phil and myself have a company called Now Master, which is contracted to TAFE to help them develop these learning resources. So we're looking for people that can help us develop that. Maybe we're very good at structuring learning and this sort of stuff, but sometimes we need contextualized knowledge which we don't have. And so we need to mobilize that. We need to have access to that. And that's why we've created this association, so that we can go to those people and say, can you help us develop these resources so that they're going to be really current. They're not just going to be written from a textbook. And part of that is about building a personal brand. I know this is probably new for a lot of you people, but you know, when you realize that the world is going to go digital, how many of you would be employed purely on your digital content? If I was to look through you, and some of you would, I'm sure a lot of you do contribute online. But the world the world that we exist in now, and I'm already working for 3 startups that have never met me, are simply going on my online brand and on my online reputation. So this is what, not only for your corporations, but even for yourself, you need to be thinking about building that personal brand, because your employment is going to come through that, and the employment for your people. But we turn that into ebooks, and we've already done one of those ebooks, but I've probably written another 10, but I just haven't published them yet. And to create some thought leadership, you know, we need to become thought leaders in some areas, and I've picked 4 or 5 that I want to become a thought leader in, and I feed that every day. Every day I try and maintain that thought leadership, because out of that comes a lot of the commercial, you know, the monetization that obviously I want to do going forward. The Edu response to this, because they see the same, is to create these sorts of organisations. And in these organisations are things like organisations like Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Future Learn, there's a whole group of universities over there. And like I say, I want to send this slide to you because you need to go and check this, even for yourself. We don't need to create we don't need to create a lot of products for ourselves these days. These people have already created and they've distributed it for free. So I'm sure the stuff on leadership here, team building, I don't know what it is that you want, but there's some wonderful free stuff that's being provided by very reputable universities. So they have got into this area which is called Massive Open Online Courses, or MOOCs. I think people pronounce them differently, but, and it's free. And it's free. They're obviously looking at what they call a freemium model, where they give away that for free and then they might charge you for the accreditation, or they might charge you for any tutorial help, or they might charge you for downloading workbooks. But basically the fundamental principle of it is to give it away for free. And I'm suggesting this resource for you. So when you're going to have to develop a new resource, think about maybe accessing the free stuff first before you go any further. And I'm working, as Richard pointed out, we're working with TAFE in India to develop a very low-cost MOOC concept, a way in which we can provide education at an affordable price to an Indian, which is basically an $800 a year person. You know, so you can't be charging $19,000 for someone that earns $800 a year. So we've got to be thinking of a price much, much lower and proportional. And we're working with TAFE to try and get that off the ground. So even TAFE is involved, and I'm actively involved in helping TAFE in developing our first MOOC, I guess you could say. And we've already signed partnerships with an Indian tutor house, which is going to help the students over there. So very, very interesting times. Let's get into some intellectual capital. What is it? What is intellectual capital? Well, looking at the definitions, I see the first thing is the cognitive knowledge, the stuff that's the policy and procedures, the facts and the figures. That's all very good. But this is what it's also about. It's the intuitive experience knowledge. And in my mind, that's the bit we're not getting. That's the bit we're not capturing because we don't know how to capture that. We ask questions that are targeted at the who, what, where, and when, rather than target questions at what is the best way. You know, there is usually only one best way to do it. A textbook will tell you the 5 ways to do it, but a textbook will never say this is the best way. That's not their job. And most of our learning in the past was about the 5 options. I need to know, in my 3-minute video, what's the best way. And I can only get that from someone who has experience, who have developed that answer honed from experience. So it's informational resources that we can use internally to drive profits, to gain new customers, create new products, improve our business. So it's an exciting thing to go and capture. But remember, we've got to be thinking about capturing that experience as well. And today, I want to sort of take you on that journey. In one way, we can do that. But I want you to also consider this, and this is one that Phil and myself have both been working on, and that's an exciting area. Most of you guys have to provide these high-level training outcomes with your hands tied behind your back, don't you? Because you don't get given the resources. And every time they see you coming through the door, they say, uh-oh, he's got another harebrained idea that's going to cost us, you know. And I want you to get, you know, we're still developing in this area, but we believe that this can happen, that you can turn a training cost into a revenue item. Now, how much more exciting is it for your directors if you go in and say, hey, you know that training budget? The training budget now is a revenue item for you. If you tap into this MOOC idea, if you tap into this capturing your intellectual property and start thinking about monetizing it, you can actually do that. And there's organizations that are already doing it. So industry are already doing it. Google, SAP are already doing customer training through MOOCs. They're actually getting their customers used to their products. They're actually putting it out there. And obviously they're creating corporate brands. They're helping with their corporate brand and their marketing. There's corporate MOOCs that are being developed. We don't need to create expensive LMSs anymore. You know, we can actually do it from the platforms that are freely available. I'll give you a place to go to have a read of a few of these platforms, but they're really quite exciting. And you can actually make money out of it. Like I say, most MOOCs are heading towards what they call a freemium product, where they give away the underpinning knowledge for free. And for you guys, that's probably a lot of the basic Blooms. I'll talk to you about Blooms and that, but the basic underpinning knowledge. The actual higher level stuff is stuff that you could lock behind a paywall. And people could learn that by having to subscribe or pay to it, or using it, getting a tutor, having some sort of assessments, and that's where an association with a organisation like ourselves at TAFE, we can actually get you to provide your training, but we can align it to national competencies. And so therefore, at the end of your training, we actually have a education institute that can actually recognise that training and issue Australian government awards. So these are all the things that you could probably monetize, or providing people with templates that accelerates the learning. All of these are good ideas. Workshops, selling your skills, sell them, don't just keep them in-house. The Guardian newspaper, I think Phil pointed out on the weekend, he said, have a look at this. Guardian are actually selling how to write journal articles, how to publish things digitally, how to work in search engine optimization. They're actually starting to take their internal corporate knowledge and they're providing masterclasses on the weekend, and they're packing out at $500 a head, these sorts of things. So why can't we think about that? Because I think this idea of training, instead of it being a cost to the organisation to actually start creating a revenue, I think you will get a lot more hearing with your organisation if that's the sort of story you get into. Obviously, continuous professional development, and I direct you to those free online courses that are run by Stanford and Yale and so forth. There's a couple of universities here. I think University of Queensland's involved, University of Melbourne's involved. So they're all putting stuff up there for free. I'm sure we can find stuff that instead of having to develop it in-house, we just use that. And even recruitment. Why wouldn't you put your onboarding online before the person even applies for the job? Or they apply for the job having completed your move. And you can actually call up their scores and see how they go. You've already done a lot of your onboarding, you've saved a lot of costs because the person has actually done a lot of their understanding of your corporate values, of your mission statements and these sort of things. You've got all that already embedded in the applicant that comes to you. So we not only get a saved revenue, we actually start to highlight people that possibly could be good employees. The actual process could actually highlight people that we should go and talk to this guy. So how do we mine it? First of all, we have to get the knowledge that's, and I call it trapped inside. If you are only sharing your knowledge in a verbal way, it's still trapped because it goes to that one person, they go away, and it's not really creating an impact. If you took that same information and put it into a digital learning product and published it, we're talking about an intergenerational thing. We're talking about, I often call about, I'm teaching my great-grandkids. That's what I'm doing. They don't exist yet, but that's who I'm teaching. Because the stuff that I'm publishing is going to be read and digested by them. We need to get tools to mine the information. We have to mine. We've got to mine this stuff. And it's hidden, it's trapped. We need to turn it into digital learning products, and there's a whole lot. There's articles that you can write, there's videos, there's audio, PowerPoints, infographics, illustrations, images and quizzes. All of these things are digital learning products. We need to know how to take that knowledge once we've got it, once we've extracted it, and put it into these products. Today I'm hopefully going to show you some of this. And then determine the platform to distribute it on. A lot of you will distribute it on your own LMS platform, but I encourage you to think about this more global mass market, particularly if you're thinking about monetizing a lot of what you're going to do. This is like I say, I contribute to Quora. I follow the answers to this question religiously because it's what are some interesting startups in the education space. There's about 300 there at the moment, and they're mostly free. They're either platforms, they're either mostly tools that you can use to capture. They don't cost anything. The cost is really in the learning, and the learning is getting quicker and quicker. I give a program half an hour to convince me, and if it doesn't teach me in half an hour, I don't use it. Because that's my attention span, because I understand that there's disposable learning. I know that's an interesting concept, but the future is that we're going to have to, and I think maybe I'll say that here, you've got to develop strategies to monetize, to turn cost into revenue. That's the process we've got to do. And both Phil and myself, we've worked on this, and this is what we've come up with. The most effective tool in mining intellectual capital, particularly that experience-based, is asking the right questions. And this is where you need to probably come to an edu place, because we get this sort of thing drummed into us all the time about asking the right questions. And that's through this, and maybe you know about Bloom's taxonomy, obviously you probably do, but there's lower order thinking and higher order thinking. And we need to be thinking when we're mining information, what are we mining? Lower order or higher order? And like I say, there's a definite split here between these two. This is what they all mean, and maybe when you get to your slide, you can have a look at it. But down at its lowest level is the ability to recall information. That's the lowest level of questioning, or that's the lowest level of intelligence, I guess you can have. You've remembered the bus number, bus timetable, or whatever. Up at the highest level, it's using knowledge to make something new. And these are very creative spaces. We tend to draw the line at about there. And in this space, we call this underpinning knowledge. So in everything you do in LMS, or everything you do in sort of your learning and development, you must start with underpinning knowledge, and we acknowledge that. But really, underpinning knowledge is the lowest level of thinking, or the lowest level of value. The highest level of value is best practice skills, but that only comes from people with experience. If you're not tapping the experience part of the intellectual capital, you're not tapping this high level. And this is the high value stuff. So how do we do that? We've developed a template. We've looked at a whole lot of questions, and this is what we've come up with. And this is the template. Like I say, I'm not going to go through it all, but these are, the colours show what you substitute, either an action, a topic, a context, and you finish with a quiz. This is our basic underpinning knowledge template that we use, and I'm more than happy to share this with you. But it's one that we've developed, so whatever topic you take, you give me a topic from your industry and I can actually apply that there and come up with all the appropriate questions, remember, for the underpinning knowledge. Here's one we did with meeting agenda. What is a meeting agenda? What is a meeting agenda like? What's the purpose of developing a meeting agenda? What are the different aspects or types? What's involved with developing? Where does it fit? How does it impact? What terms are used? Where can I find more information? And a quiz. This is a tool that we use for mining the lower level. Now, I don't think you should be putting your best people on this. Someone in grade 12 can probably do an internet research and come up with a pretty good job on that. So we tend not to waste our best minds on these questions. These are fact questions. These are how, what, where, and why. These are lower level thinking. So we don't use this on our industry professors. These aren't the questions we ask. But they're essential for building that underpinning knowledge. I said before about contextualization, how we're going to contextualization. When we invented the education system we had today, it got invented basically in the industrial age. Industrial age was all about cohort, generic teaching. We got a whole group of people and we taught them all a generic skill. The internet is allowing highly contextualized learning. So you know that meeting agenda that I just did, and you thought, yeah, great, Pete, you've got all that listed out. You know you can contextualize those questions by industry. So every one of those questions you can have for the mining industry, for the retail industry, because some industries approach those things differently. According to what we've looked up, level 3 industries, there's 1,000 of them. There's 1,000 ABS level 3 industries. So every one of those questions that I asked could add at the end for a particular industry. I might even say for a different organisation, because those questions are different for a startup, for a small, medium business, for a corporate organisation, for a government, and even a non-government, non-profit. Each of those questions should have been contextualised by that. Then you could have even done it by staff, for an employee, for a team leader, for a senior manager. Each of the questions would be different and the answers would be different for each one of those. Or you might do it by learner level, for a new manager, for a practicing manager, for a master manager that's looking to add something. So, and then finally by location, by culture, or by geographic. When you work the permutations of that one little screen I had on manage meeting agenda could have been, I think we did do the calculation, but we ran out of calculators because it's in the billions, the contextualization that you could put one topic. And this is the area that we need to be thinking about. Not thinking about generic training, but drilling right down to this level, because the learner at the other end is wanting to learn at that level. They are wanting to learn the specific, to solve a specific problem that they're currently facing. So that just gives you an idea of the scope that we need to work with, you know, and the space that we've all still got to work with. So this is the one, and I'm finishing here, but this is when I talked about that high-level blooms, when I talked about capturing the really good stuff. These are the sorts of questions that you would ask those people. The most important function of a meeting agenda. This isn't a fact or fiction, because a textbook will say these are the functions of a meeting agenda. I want to know, as a person who's got to run a meeting agenda or develop one, what's the most important function? I need to know the most important. I need to know the most effective way to develop it. You won't read these things in textbooks. I know, because they're all piled up on my table in there where I have to teach. You can easily spot a poorly prepared, this idea, you can easily spot because. So these are sentences that we can complete. The single most useful bit of advice to give a manager about developing a meeting agenda is to, and I'm going to give you a test in a minute. I'm going to ask you some of these questions and see how you go. Managers are least effective in developing meeting agendas when they, when developing a meeting agenda. So the biggest hindrance, the trouble with a poorly developed. These are the questions that are mining that experience. These are the questions, or these are the answers that don't exist generally. They exist in the minds of people, but we're not digitizing them. We're not capturing it and turning it into learning products.